This is ESPN Classic.
But Havlicek steals it. Havlicek stole the ball. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
United to Amici. Amici powers in.
Won their 6th NBA championship.
Gibson swing. This is gonna be a home run. Unbelievable! I don't believe what I just saw.
In 1970, a young Johnny Bench sparked comparisons to another Oklahoman, his idol, Mickey Mantle. Bench's raw power prompted the enunciation of Cincinnati's Big Red Machine, which won 5 division titles and 2 world championships. The machine was also fueled by Bench's arm. In an era defined by the stolen base, few dared run on him. By the end of the decade, the promise of Bench was spent all too soon, leaving us to wonder what might have been.
Johnny Bench was a guy who made every other catcher look like he was working in snowshoes. He was so nimble behind the plate. He was so elegant.
He redefined what the art of catching was all about. He was like a ballet dancer behind the plate.
They got a picture of me in midair trying to tag Billy Williams crossing home plate, and I look like I'm horizontal, like Baryshnikov and shin guards.
You had no doubt if you threw the ball in the dirt, if you tried to chase the curveball in the dirt, when the runner's in scoring position, that Johnny Bench would block it.
He knew how to block the plate. He knew enough to let the guy see the plate and get the guy and block the plate.
What made him a great catcher was his quickness. He was a big guy who could throw darts to second base.
He made a throw to second base, and I swear to God, I mean, just went from behind his ear on a line, you know, like ankle high to second base. And it was such a throw. I mean, I felt like that throw had just like sucked all the air out of the stadium.
I remember the first time that I was covering second, I thought I was going to have to scoop the ball out of the dirt. And instead, it just had that little extra hop and a little extra rise, about 8 inches off the ground. All I did is caught it, and the guy slid right into my glove.
He was able to get rid of it so quickly, in such good position. I mean, you very rarely ever saw him double clutch with the ball in his glove.
Bench was awesome. Well, he picked me off first base over there, and they told me to be careful. And somebody sneaked in behind me, and I was picked off where I knew it.
He would intimidate the other team just by virtue of the fact that he was behind the plate. You know, his snap throws to first base, the way he would throw runners out at second. Suddenly, what was a defensive position became offensive.
He was also revolutionary in that he was the first catcher with his ability to catch the ball one-handed. And so he really opened up a new style, a style with much greater flair behind the plate.
It was amazing sometimes where I would think that I would come up with a pitch out of the blue that you wouldn't throw in a certain situation, and boom, he'd be putting it down.
He beat you so many different ways. He beat you with his arm behind the plate. He beat you with handling pitchers. He beat you with his bat.
With the modern day lively baseball, he might have killed somebody because when he hit the ball, he hit it hard. He very seldom had a blue pit. He would hit a lot of line drive outs, and when he hit home runs, there were some mammoth shots.
There's a high drive to deep right center. That one is going, and it is gone in the upper deck. A tremendous drive on a high outside pitch by Johnny Bench.
To see this man every day is like you're seeing Gone with the Wind every day of your life.
Movie star handsome, Bench won 10 straight Gold Gloves, 2 MVP awards, and played on 4 pennant winners. He was loved by kids of all ages and persuasions.
Like Roy Rogers and Gene Autry used to be the people. Kids had heroes. They had somebody to model themselves after. If they model themselves after an athlete, I hope that I'm the type of individual that they would model themselves after.
Boy, these kids all sports sure must be great. If Johnny Bench says they're great, I wish I could play like him.
He's a guy who had a name that transcended all interest. If you said Johnny Bench, They knew who he was, and they knew who he played for.
If you want to go into business, the Yellow Pages can help you too, even if your name's not Johnny Bench.
He's on the cover of Time magazine in 1972. And there he is, Johnny Bench, the great catcher. The best dressed man in sports, Johnny Bench.
And he's bad, bad, Leroy Brown, the baddest man in the whole damn town. Badder than old King Kong, and meaner than the junkyard dog.
Everywhere we went in the big cities, it seemed like Johnny Bench and Pete Rose always had a limousine picking them up to go to talk show.
You are an oil painting. You are the most gorgeous thing. I would like to play backgammon on that board.
He was the bon vivant of Cincinnati when he first came here, squaring around all the local lovelies.
On at least one occasion, Bench's social interests ran into the enemy camp. During the 1972 World Series against Oakland, he caused headlines by going to a basketball game with the daughter of A's owner, Charlie Finley.
I was quite a charming, debonair young man in those days.
I remember my girlfriend, my sorority sister from college, lived in Cincinnati, and she said, "You won't believe it. It's on all the radio stations. They're saying things like, word has it that Johnny Bench went out with Charlie Finley's daughter."
Charlie would have come looking for me, and I would have been in more trouble with Charlie. I was more afraid of what Charlie might do than anything else.
I don't know why he did it. It must have been for publicity.
If Bench was conducting a love affair with fame, he was also losing respect, where he would one day need it most, in the Cincinnati clubhouse.
You had some players that kind of resented Johnny Bench. A lot of it was professional jealousy. A lot of it was the fact that Johnny Bench was just not a very warm person. He had this war with Pete Rose, this unspoken war that nobody knew about.
Bench and Rose got along good at the beginning. He even got together on a bowling alley and stuff like that. They had a lot of different ideas. They weren't that close.
I really think part of that was because Pete was jealous of Johnny for being larger nationwide, and Johnny was jealous of Pete for being bigger in Cincinnati.
There was a rivalry for Cincinnati's affections. Rose was homegrown, Bench was sort of the corporate guy, and Rose was sort of the shot in a beer guy.
There's a little more elegance to Johnny than there is to Pete. Johnny went to the golf course and Pete went to the racetrack.
When they went to work, and that's when they came through the doors, business, that's the difference in that club, business. Now, they didn't run with each other when they left.
They just went their separate ways. They weren't, in that sense, socially compatible. I mean, Pete's choice of recreational ventures is different.
Down in the field, and Johnny Bench comes over to me. He says, "You know, you ought to talk to Pete Rose. Talk to him about what?" He says, "The company he's keeping." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, he's got some bad guys he runs around with, and he's going to run into trouble."
If Bench held his teammates to a higher standard, he was even more demanding of the media. As a result, he received mixed reviews.
He was very tough to deal with, Bench. He was aloof.
He and I, for a period of about a year and a half in the late 70s, rarely ever spoke to each other. And I commented to him one night in Philadelphia, "I don't need you, and you sure as hell don't need me."
Johnny, have you had a chance to think about possibly some of the reasons for the drop in your batting average?
I think everybody's had a lot of time to think about the reasons for my drop in my batting average.
Johnny expected you to do your homework. He expected you to have watched the game, to have some intelligent observations about the game if you were going to impose on him and ask him some questions.
Johnny was an interesting guy in that he would start a sentence and you would think, "I've got a great quote here," and by the end of it, you didn't know what he'd said.
He could be short, he could be rude, he could, let you know that, not today or whatever, but for the most part, he was a guy I really enjoyed dealing with.
Johnny was never difficult as far as I was concerned. Johnny was, in certain ways, proper, and I would prefer him to be less proper.
Johnny was very good with the media, but in a sense, he was a no-nonsense guy.
If after a game or at any time you went and talked to Pete Rose first, when you went to Johnny, your answers were shorter, and he wasn't as cooperative. He liked to be the main man.
Johnny Bench was born on December 7th, 1947 in Oklahoma City. While he was still a toddler, his family settled in a small town in the southwest part of the state.
Johnny Bench comes from Binger, Oklahoma. Where is Binger, Oklahoma, John? Well, that's about half a mile back of resumed speed.
Binger's a small community, about 700 people at that time. Of course, everyone knew everything that you did.
We were all poor, so we didn't know we were poor, because everybody we ran around with and associated with was in the same boat.
Watching Mickey Mantle on TV and heard he was from Oklahoma, the next superstar from Oklahoma, and I asked my dad, I said, "You can be from Oklahoma and play in the major leagues? Oh, that's what I want to be."
That is all he ever thought about, Grandpa. I think it was just born in him.
My wife and I were in the Binger pharmacy. The pharmacist brings him over and says, Coach, I want to introduce you to one of your players. Johnny, with his big hand, sticks it out, says, "Hello, Coach. I'm Johnny Bench, and I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player."
Bench soon displayed talent in a number of directions. An excellent student at Binger High School, he was also popular among the student body while excelling in sports, earning all-state honors in basketball and setting a winning tone in baseball, where he hoped to make his mark.
From day one, always wanted to catch, always good at it.
From the very first game on, Johnny was calling all the pitches. Sometimes he would shake off what I would want him to pitch, and a lot of times I would go in and I'd say, "Well, Johnny, this is what we need to do." And he said, "No, Coach, I know this hitter." He knew what every kid's weakness was.
In Bench's senior year, fate nearly destroyed his dreams. Aboard an old bus, he and his teammates were heading home from a baseball game. It was on April Fool's Day.
And we came to a T intersection, and Coach Dempsey said, we don't have any brakes. And he said, "April Fool." Looked up, and the foot pedal was on the floor.
I stood up and saw him pumping the brakes and realized, no brakes.
And I knew we had to go into that rail, and I jumped across grabbed David Gunter across the seat, yanked him down on the floor.
People were flying around, you were falling, but it seemed like it took forever for the bus to go from the point where it hit the guardrail to the point of rest.
We hit the guardrail, rolled over 3 times. Danny Hodges and Harold Sims were killed in the bus wreck.
I guess Coach Denzi was the first to check on the 2 boys, and he said, "You guys don't go over there." So we knew at that time what had happened.
After recovering from the trauma of losing 2 teammates in the crash, Bench went on to graduate first in his class in 1965.
Coming from a rural high school in Binger, Oklahoma, he had an education and, more importantly, a poise far beyond anything that you could expect normally from someone coming from that kind of a background.
This kid had one big IQ. He was very smart. And I think Johnny would have made it in any field he pursued.
He makes a valedictorian address, and his theme of the address was, "The students of today will be the leaders of tomorrow."
Bench's future was set when he was drafted in the 2nd round by the Cincinnati Reds. In 1967, Bench was called up to the Reds as a backup catcher. Loaded with talent, he at times revealed patches of green beneath his confident exterior.
We'd sit on the couch, and we'd watch the Saturday game of the week where somebody would be pitching, and my dad would sit there, "Why, hell, I could hit that guy." The first time we played the St. Louis Cardinals, I faced Bob Gibson, and Dad and Mom drove up from Oklahoma City to St. Louis, and I struck out for the 3rd time. And we're behind, but I'm walking back to the dugout, and a smile came across my face, and Dave Bristol, the manager, who took baseball very seriously, said, "What the hell are you smiling about?" And I said, "I was just thinking, I don't think Dad can hit this guy."
But Bench didn't do much better, hitting 163 in 26 games.
First time he walks into the dressing room, there's a 2nd-string catcher sitting by the door, Pavletic. And he looks up at Johnny and he says, "I guess you think you're here to get my job." And John looks at him and says, "No, I'm not here to get your job," and points to Johnny Edwards, the starting catcher, and says, "I'm here to get his job."
By the spring of 1968, Bench had Edwards' job.
Johnny Edwards had been our catcher for a long time in Cincinnati, and I love Johnny Edwards, but you forgot about Johnny Edwards pretty fast because Bench came out of the box fast and never looked back.
There was a pitcher for the Reds named Jerry Arrigo, who was throwing what he thought was a fastball, and he threw one fastball, and Bench caught it barehanded
as if to say, that's not a fastball, and threw it right back at Arrigo, and Arrigo got the message.
On his way to winning Rookie of the Year honors, Bench was the first freshman catcher to play in an All-Star game.
Sitting there in my locker, and across the way is Willie Mays. And he looks over and sees me, and he walks right over, and he stood right in front of my locker, and he said, "You should have been the starting catcher." I mean, it was unbelievable.
He asked Ted Williams to sign a ball for him, and Williams was so astute that he signed it to a Hall of Famer for sure.
After taking over as manager of the Reds in 1970, Sparky Anderson wasted no time drawing Johnny Bench into his confidence.
I walked out of the spring training clubhouse, and Sparky's standing there. And he said, "John, what would you think if we maybe took hitting on that field, on field 1, and then had the pitchers work on field 2? And I'm thinking, wow, what a guy. I mean, what a man who asked me in my opinion. I felt like a man. I felt like a professional for the first time.
When he was born to be the one. And I said, they say the Messiah will come. I believe the Messiah has come.
Under Anderson's nurturing control, the Reds blazed into the 1970 campaign with Bench hitting on all cylinders.
In 1970, the Reds kind of exploded. They had this new manager, and they won like 70 out of their first 100 games, and they're in first place, and everybody's talking about this great team. And, well, Johnny Bench was at the center of all that.
Fly ball to left. Could be. Yes, sir. It's a homer for Johnny Bench.
I didn't see a pitcher in the league that I feared. They couldn't throw it by me. They got me out, but they couldn't throw it by me. I could hit their breaking ball. I could throw anybody out.
He would get hot, and over a 2-3 week period, seems like he hit a home run every night. When he was in one of those stretches, you didn't want to miss in that bat.
He didn't strike out much for a power hitter, put the ball in play. He was just an accomplished hitter. He worked at all parts of his game.
Bench led the majors with 45 homers and 148 runs batted in, as the Reds won the division by 14.5 games. After beating the Pirates to reach the World Series, they hit a brick wall called the Baltimore Orioles.
3-1 pitch to Bench. Drilled. Wow. Boy, that Robinson is something.
Although the Reds lost the series in 5 games, Bench had gained enough star status to be drafted by Bob Hope as a member of his USO Christmas tour.
We have one of the great guys of the guy that's selected as the most valuable player in baseball and the player of the year, Johnny Bench from the Cincinnati Reds, right here.
We landed in Greece and took the helicopter, and I had to sit with Ursula Andress next to me and fly over to the John F. Kennedy, the ship to John F. Kennedy, and stayed up all night with the guys and hung out with them, and then we went to Vietnam and then to Korea. And to think I had the opportunity to share a Christmas with him and also with the troops. It was unbelievable.
John had a great maturity for a young fellow at that point in his life, and relatively with ease he handled media.
As Bench's celebrity grew, so did the legend of his play. Finishing the 1972 season with 40 homers and 125 RBIs, he led the Reds into the playoffs against the Pirates. Tied at 2 games and down by a run in the rubber match, Bench led off in the last of the 9th. What followed is vintage Hollywood.
They kept yelling, "Johnny, Johnny," and I didn't look. I mean, I don't look around. I'm focused on the field, and they said, "It's your mom." And I turned around, and she had this angelic look on her face.
I said, "Johnny, this is it." I meant that if he didn't hit a home run and they didn't get in the World Series, that was his last chance.
I smiled inwardly, and I thought, gosh, if it were only that easy.
In the 9th inning, Johnny Bench was the first hitter, and I threw him a couple of good pitches, and he fouled him off, and then I thought I threw him another good pitch.
1-2. The line. And a pitch to Bench. Change into the air to deep right field.
What was unusual about that, Johnny never hit home runs to right field. He hit the 0-2 pitch to right center field. That was a great game. Put us in the World Series.
He hit so many big home runs, But that one there, to me, would be the biggest that he ever hit, because we're in trouble. We're gone. It's lights out, Lucy.
It was absolutely the greatest, most exhilarating moment, but I was out of body. I mean, I ran around the bases like that's what I was supposed to do, and never thinking about the lung at that time. Nobody really knew about the lung. I didn't tell anybody.
Just weeks earlier, Bench underwent what he thought was a routine medical exam.
And you walk in and you take the more x-rays, and they come in and said, we found a spot on your lung.
Well, I got a call from Johnny, and he said in the exam he had, they'd found a spot. Johnny didn't smoke, and he was awfully young. It didn't seem as though it was anything too serious, but you don't take a chance with spots on lungs.
We told him that it was probably benign, but it could be malignant. Had some of the features on x-ray that would appear to be malignant.
I remember talking to John, and I remember how traumatic the atmosphere was, because he realized that he could be finished.
I'm a fatalist. I understand that, you know, sometimes the ticker runs out on you, and sometimes things happen in your life, and whatever happens, happens.
It was a sense of, that's just our luck. We get an all-star, we get a superstar, and this happens to him.
There was big concerns, you know, with mainly him personally in his life. You know, when things like that happen, you forget about baseball and hanging curveballs. It's life after that.
After losing the series to Oakland, Bench was awarded a second MVP in 3 years. Soon, he would undergo a surgery that would change his life.
I was treating this like any other surgery I was doing at that time, but when I saw that NBC truck parked in front of the hospital, then I thought, this is different.
And they operated, and they found that it was just a spot on the outside of his lung that they could remove, and nothing did ever bother him anymore.
The first day after surgery, I walked in, and he was standing up. He had a tube in his chest, as we routinely use, and he was standing up with a little help from a nurse.
I was never the same. I mean, I don't think anybody can cut their ribs and cut across their chest and cut nerves and muscles, and that's the one thing is I don't think I reached the possibilities for my career. I don't think I ever got to the point where I could have gotten to.
Following his recovery from surgery, Bench resumed his job behind the plate, and over the next 3 seasons, averaged 29 homers and 114 RBIs. In 1975, he played in his 3rd World Series. The Big Red Machine took on Boston.
At that time, I believe baseball was here, and the other sports I caught up. Football and basketball, I caught up. And because of the exciting World Series we had, baseball took off again.
Down 1 game to the Red Sox, Bench went on national TV during a rain delay in Game 2 and revealed to America how he intended to hit Boston's pitcher once play resumed.
Right now he's turning the ball over away from us and changing speeds as he's using everything he has.
In the course of the interview, made the comment that if Bill Lee insisted upon throwing him his curveball, that he was going to stay back on the ball and try to hit it the other way.
43 million Americans are listening. Johnny Bench said, Lee's pitching me outside, I'm going to have to hit him the other way. First pitch, I throw sinker low and away. He drives it in the right field gap for a double, and I'm out of the ball game. He turns out to be the tying run. Do you think one of those 43 million Americans would have given me a call and told me he was going to hit me the other way? I don't think so.
After winning Game 2, the Reds went on to take a 3-2 lead into Game 6. Up by 3 runs in the bottom of the 8th, they faced a pinch hitter with 2 on and 2 outs.
Bernie Carbo had the worst, most god-awful swings that any major league hitter could have. Raleigh Eastwick threw him a slider down and in. I have no clue how he even got a bat on it.
Just did get a piece of it to stay alive.
And I knew he had to be looking for the slider again. He had to be worried about inside. The thing I forgot was that Bernie didn't have, at that time, any kind of thought process at home plate.
The next pitch, I thought, you know, it's a fastball. I'm challenging him. I've got to give him my best pitch. If he hits it, he hits it.
And Raleigh threw him that pitch, and bang.
Deep center field, way back, we're tied up.
And it absolutely, just like a dagger in my heart. We were up 3-2. We were going to be the world champions, and now it's tied at 6 apiece.
In the bottom of the 9th, each team committed a rare mental mistake, beginning with a failure to communicate between Bench and his pitcher.
He called for a slider, and I threw the fastball. And he's setting up outside, and I throw one middle of the plate in. Freddie Lynn just happened to hit the ball that time. And he popped it up down the short left field line where George Foster was.
Don Zimmer's yelling to Denny Doyle, who's the third base runner, no, no, no. And Denny thought he said, go, go, go. He tries to score. George, I don't think he threw out anybody all year. Throws a one-hopper, I tag Denny out, double play.
And of course, as I'm coming back to the mound and John's handing me the ball, he's cursing me, telling me, you know, that I had missed the sign. Had he not hit the ball would have been in the backstop and they would have won the game. And all I told him was, it's funny how things like that work out.
Then Pat Darcy pitches the 11th and comes out to start the 12th. And he starts to warm up. I mean, barely got it to me in the air, and I looked over towards Sparky in the dugout, and I said, no chance.
A 1-0 delivery to Fisk. He swings, long drive, left field. If it stays fair, it's gone. Home run!
I'm standing there watching it, and I'm seeing Don Zimmer. I always like to see him get excited. Didn't particularly like it that time. Whether it had been Carlton or whether it had been somebody in that inning, we were going to lose. And there wasn't any question we were going to play Game 7.
With the Reds ahead 4-3, Carl Yastrzemski flied out to end Game 7.
Geronimo's under, and Cincinnati has won the World Championship.
So I look into John. John's halfway to the mound. He's going, what do we do? I just ran in and jumped in his arms. I mean, it was the greatest feeling of my life.
Here's Johnny Bench. And John, a career that's been star-studded, every respect for you. It's got to be the biggest thrill of your career.
It is, Mark. I'm so excited. I really, and here's Bob Housen, who made it all possible. And I'll tell you, it was just a complete effort. I've never wanted to win anything so bad, and the way we won it, I think, makes it even more exciting.
He was pouring champagne over my head. It was coming in my eyes, and he's hugging me to death. That moment would be one that I know I don't believe I'll ever be able to replace that one.
The following year, the Reds returned to the Fall Classic, this time against the Yankees. Bench found himself at the center of a first-class New York media blaze.
One of the sports writers asked Sparky Anderson to compare Johnny Bench with Thurman Munson. Thurman Munson happened to be standing in the room. He was going to be the next interview, and he was off in a corner, and Sparky didn't know it.
And I said, wait a minute, that's not fair to Thurman. And it's not fair to John. Because nobody can be compared to Johnny Bench.
That statement set off a furor all over New York that Sparky was Sparky Anderson disparaging Thurman Munson.
Billy Martin just became absolutely enraged over Sparky making that statement. It was one of the interesting sidelights to a very brief World Series.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Boys, I got news for you. We're going to be world champions again, Sugar Bear. I got news for you. We are now going to be world champions again.
He did everything a catcher can do. They did not steal a base against him until the last game of the series, when the series was over. And it was just a bravura demonstration of a super player.
Hitting .533 and named series MVP, Bench led Cincinnati to a sweep of the Yankees. Winners of back-to-back World Championships, the Big Red Machine was about to crash at the height of its powers.
What made Johnny Bench such a leader was the way he carried himself. That team has such a swagger, just the way those guys walked, just the way they moved on the field. And it just sort of struck fear into the opposition.
I remember one day we were head up like 8-1 or something like that in the 8th inning. And we were kind of nervous because we had this lead, and you know, any minute they're going, something bad could happen.
The Big Red Machine would humiliate you. If they were leading you 6-0, they would try to beat you 10-0. They could run, they could hit for power, they could hit for average. They were very smart.
We may not have been Phi Beta Kappas off the field, but once you put us on that baseball field, everyone knew their job.
Beginning in December 1976, the Big Red Machine began to come undone piece by piece. The first star to be traded was Tony Perez.
I didn't want to believe it. I mean, the heart and soul of me and of the ball club and everything else. A man you loved as a friend, respected as a player, and knew that he was the glue that put that all together. That should never, ever have happened.
That was very, emotional for me because, seeing a teammate like Johnny, and cry because I was leaving, that was something that really hit me, and I still remember.
Perez shouldn't have been traded. They should have made, to my way of thinking, a larger effort to keep Pete. Morgan stayed around for a few years. And I think that, had Tony not been traded, that club had a chance to do it again.
As the Reds lost steam, Bench's 1975 marriage to Vicky ended after just 2 years, leading New York columnist Dick Young to speculate about Johnny's sexual preferences.
He was trying to suggest that Bench was gay. Well, if Bench is gay, that's Bench's business.
It certainly set off a firestorm, and I can understand why Bench never talked to Young again and held it against him.
I ignored him. He was a small, pitiful man, as far as I was concerned.
Dick Young disliked almost everyone who wasn't Dick Young, particularly with a guy like Bench who was so macho and played a macho position.
And it was something that was unfounded, an innuendo that sounded like something was happening, nothing based on anything, and he just wrote it.
There were a lot of vicious things said about Johnny Bench, not only in public, but also in the clubhouse. And the reason a lot of those things existed, Johnny Bench was not a very likable person by his teammates.
I thought he had many personalities as far as he could be somewhat aloof one day, and then the next day he could come in and be one of the funniest guys on the ball club.
Under siege by rumor and gossip, Bench went on about his business. In 1980, he set a National League endurance record by catching at least 100 games in his 13th straight season. But the end was coming.
The 81 season was very awkward. He had basically agreed with the team that he would catch 2 days a week. And, it was a joke in spring training. Was that going to be Mondays and Wednesdays? Is it going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays?
I'm not going to kill myself. I think I have to take care of myself, and if I can play first base at times, just against certain left-handers, it'll give me a break from behind the plate.
As it turned out, the Reds traded Ray Knight after the 81 season and to open a spot for John at third base, where he was certainly ill-suited.
There was a big source of controversy when he said, I'm not going to catch anymore, I'm going to play third base. People were going, wait a minute now, who's in charge of this team? And that's really when things began to fall apart for the Reds.
He will catch 2 games a week, and that's what we intend to honor and try to work it out to everybody's satisfaction.
Third base, he did not have the agility, the moving from side to side, and he had in my opinion, he had a problem there.
We had a pretty early clue that third base was going to be a problem. The first game in spring training, he played on AstroTurf, and it was a disaster. And I think the lasting memory a lot of the sports writers who covered the team had of John as a third baseman was that day.
As a third baseman in 1982, Bench committed 19 errors in 107 games and managed just 38 RBIs.
All hell broke loose because the word got out that Bench wasn't playing, that he had been benched because he couldn't handle the position. I'll always remember that as the realization that the Big Red Machine was done now, that these guys were not invincible and that they could not play all positions.
We were in Pittsburgh, and he says, I think I'm going to retire. He felt like the time was come. He was going to go out and go out as a winner and go out as a person that was known for what he was and what he did for the game, and not just to hang on and keep going.
In May, Bench made his decision public. He would retire at the end of the season. Cities across the league paid tribute to the player and the man.
John was so well liked, so well received everywhere that these things weren't exactly spontaneous, but at the same time, the reaction of the fans was a spontaneous tribute to a great Hall of Famer.
It was amazing, and people everywhere he went, they lavished him with gifts, standing ovations, and John just ate it up.
I remember the Dodgers going to great lengths to honor him. In fact, the Dodger writers, I think, gave him a pair of cowboy boots, and we in Cincinnati decided, well, gee, if the Dodger writers are going to give him something, we have to give him something too. And so we kind of cobbled together a last-minute award to present to him on Johnny Bench night.
On September 17th, 1983, Johnny Bench's extraordinary 17-year career was marked by a spectacular celebration at Riverfront Stadium.
That was probably the single best night of my professional career. I have made my decision. I was stepping away from something that had been so good to me.
You have made this day complete. You have made it better than I could have ever written a script for.
In the back of their mind, you know, boy, it'd be great if he hit a home run. Nah, we can't expect that.
There it is.
My partner Joe Nuxall called the home run, and Joe broke down and started crying on the air when Bench hit the home run, because he felt, as I did, that there was no one we'd ever been around that could do something like that on a regular or semi-regular basis, and Johnny Bench could. It was amazing.
I was a writer and supposed to be detached and objective and, you know, hard and cynical and everything. I felt a lump in my throat as I watched him go around the bases.
He just had a sense of timeliness. He had a little bit of showbiz blood somewhere in him.
I went out for a curtain call, and it was a little embarrassing, but at the same time, it was just so exhilarating.
The demonstrative way that he reacted was kind of out of character, I thought, for him. It was a very emotional time, and he is not a very emotional guy, at least not on the surface.
I gave something back to them. They gave to me. I gave all my career to them, and yet we gave them one more swing of joy.
I remember asking John if he was going to miss going to the stadium. And he said, I will miss going to the stadium like you will miss going to your job every day. He said, I really won't miss the stress.
I thought Johnny should have stayed in baseball. I thought Johnny would have been a good manager. I thought he would be able to impart to players the knowledge and the ability that he had. But for somehow or another, I don't think he wanted to stay in the game.
I never wanted to be a manager, because they never paid managers $100,000, and I was making more than that, so I wasn't really willing to spend 8 months 24/7 of being a manager.
He shows up maybe 3 or 4 times a year in Cincinnati for a couple of days to watch, but for him, that's enough.
If the stress of his public life helped to destroy his third marriage, he at least had a son, named after former Indiana basketball coach Bobby Knight.
I'm really trying to be the best father, and I think I'm doing a great job at that. I just haven't succeeded too well with, I guess, the responsibility. Maybe I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old dad, that they're not like that. I mean, they don't stay at home, and they don't want to just, you know, be there when you get there and all that stuff. They've got other interests as well, and I probably don't share that as well as I should.
Johnny has his own unique way of handling things in the best way he can, and he don't share his feelings, but the family know how he feels, because there's only one way of knowing: his eyes.
I feel very honored to stand before all of you today and accept this plaque and go into the Hall of Fame with the greatest people on earth.
In the summer of '89, the city of Cincinnati would have belonged to Johnny Bench had it not been for the fall to earth of its favorite son.
The fact that baseball launched its investigation of Pete the same summer that Johnny was destined for Cooperstown put a cloud on that whole experience for him. Every other question he was asked was about Pete.
Johnny, let's do an interview on the Hall of Fame. Congratulations on being in the Hall of Fame. What about Pete?
Pete didn't pick that time to have his gambling habits uncovered, and it was unfortunate that seemingly everywhere Johnny went, among other things, the subject always got around to Pete.
Some of the high gloss on his accomplishment was diminished by the swirl around Pete when he was inducted to the Hall of Fame. And he continually is peppered with questions about this, and too often he takes the bait.
They're still battling. Bench doesn't want Rose anywhere near the Hall of Fame. Rose tells Bench to get off his high horse.
Pete, in certain interviews, has said, "I'm jealous." No, I'm not jealous. I'm not at all. I'm disappointed. I'm upset.
When Bench's co-host on a local radio talk show came out in support of Rose's bid for induction into Cooperstown, he quit the program in protest.
Several people took Marty aside beforehand and said, you know, don't do this, don't talk about Pete, and Johnny was one of them.
Marty said what he believed, and I think that should have been it.
Since his retirement, Bench has stayed close to baseball as a national radio and TV broadcaster. In 1997, he attempted to qualify for the Senior PGA Tour.
Johnny Bench, like all terrific athletes, was fueled by competition. I promise you that Johnny Bench would give up a big part of his baseball legend if he could be good enough to go out and play competitively on the Senior PGA Tour.
The hardest thing for a great athlete, Hall of Famer like Johnny Bench, naturally has the ability, and he has the strength. But when it comes to playing golf, you got to be a shot maker. And that you can't get late in life.
If Bench was denied greatness in golf, he was assured a reigning position in baseball's Hall of Fame.
I remember I said to Red Smith, I've seen Campy and Berra, this fellow's better than that. And Red said to me, I've seen Dickie and I've seen Mickey Cochran, and this feller is better than them also. Ergo, Johnny Bench was the best catcher who ever lived.
Johnny Bench had probably spoiled more young catchers' careers because they weren't Johnny Bench. He raised the bar on what people thought a catcher should do.
Johnny was a genius. Johnny did things that no other catcher before had contemplated, and few catchers since have approached. And I think when you think of Johnny Bench, you think of greatness.
How much time did the surgeon's scalpel exact from his career? How much pop did it drain from his bat? How dispiriting was the downgrading of the Big Red Machine, of the marital difficulties, or the resulting bad press? Although we're not likely to learn the answers to these questions, one thing is clear about Johnny Bench. No one ever caught a better game of baseball. For ESPN Classic Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.